Hello, it is my pleasure to contribute to the Translation Aloud series with this reading from my translation of a novel by Serhiy Synhaivsky, The Road to Asmara. And for this reading of an excerpt from the novel, I'm very honored to have the author join us from Kyiv, from the capital of Ukraine. He will read an excerpt in Ukrainian, the original, from partway through the novel, and then we will continue with my English translation.
Надвечір вітер посилився, і по обличчях сусідів я зрозумів, що погода псується. Я сидів на терасі невеличкого бару з видом на море та єдину місцеву пам'ятку – церкву Святого Михайла. Нас розділяв виболок, закиданий уламками тари, де-інде їх давно б уже розмили на халупи, але тут порт, і цього добра вистачає. На тому боці, трохи нижче від церкви, на майданчику з двома рядами столиків та електричним табло грали в бінго. Я згадав про своє пиво і ковтнув із пляшки. Щойно з морозильника вона була в пухкому інеї, але відтоді минуло 5 хвилин. На світі мало наочніших прикладів марноти буття, ніж пиво в асипському барі без кондиціонера. Якщо ти вирішив розтягти кайф, пляшка впливає на очах, а вміст стає тієї ж температури, що й навколишні повітря. Якщо ж випиваєш усе зразу, дорогоцінна волога вийде крізь пори так стрімко, що ти не встигнеш нічого відчути. Ще 5 хвилин тому я мав 1,5 бири і перечуття 0,33 смаковитого холодного пива. А тепер пшик. Красуня церква зів'яла під тягарем хмар. Цілий день вона міняла наряди від бусково-рожевих до лимонових і салатових, а зараз стояла чорна, як моряцька вдова. Море зберігало похмуре мовчання. Лиш ген край неба закипали баранці. На шторм не схоже. Ау, Зайнаб, ти лик Зайнаб? Так, дощ, великий дощ.
Later in the afternoon, the wind picked up, and from the faces of those at neighboring tables, I knew the weather was getting worse. I was sitting on the terrace of a small bar, with a view of the sea and the town's only attraction, St. Michael's Church. Between us was a ravine littered with broken crates, which would have long since been filched for hovels in any other place, but in a port, there's no shortage. On the other side, and a little down from the church, some people in a courtyard were playing bingo, with 2 rows of tables and an electric scoreboard. I remembered my beer and took a gulp from the bottle. Straight from the freezer, it had been covered with frost, but that was 5 minutes ago. There could hardly be a better example in the world of the vanity of life than a bottle of beer in an Aseb bar without air conditioning. If you decide to draw out your pleasure, the bottle starts swimming right before your eyes as its contents come to match the temperature of the ambient air. But if you drink it all right away, the precious liquid will leak out through your pores so swiftly that you won't have time to feel a damn thing. A mere 5 minutes ago, I still had cash and the anticipation of 330 mils of tasty cold beer. Now, zilch. The pretty church wilted under the weight of the clouds. All day long, the daylight had draped her in colors, lilac pink to lemony to light green, but now she stood, dark as a sailor's widow. The sea kept a morose silence. Only far away on the horizon, a line of whitecaps was beginning to churn. It didn't look like a storm. Au Zainab, Tilik Zainab. Yes, rain, big rain. The bar owner came out on the terrace, rolled up and firmly tied the awning, shuttered the windows, and stood on the threshold, hesitating. He was reluctant to drive away his customers. We only get this once every 10 years, but what a downpour. Bingo! A white line flashed on the horizon like a power surge. The scoreboard and the string lights died out, and the first thunder rolled over the sea. The caller lugged his control board toward the tented buffet, and the players rushed there also. But there wasn't enough room for everyone, so the ones at the back dashed down the ravine and up the opposite slope toward us. A young couple was the first to reach the terrace. The girl was laughing hysterically, covering herself with her hands. Her gauze dress had stuck in all the wrong places. A score of wet, panting people, smeared in mud from top to toe, followed on their heels and crammed into the bar. The church disappeared from sight, as did the courtyard, the footpath, and the sea. A dog yelping in terror and some empty plastic canisters were swept past the door.
Next to me, an elderly man in foggy lenses kept shaking his head and whispering something. Once in a while, he would stick his head outside to wipe the mud from his shirt, but the rain pelted down so hard that his palm would return empty. What did you say? I couldn't help asking. He took off his glasses, and I saw only then that it wasn't sweat or rain running down his face. The grain, he said, looking at me with eyes reddened from crying. All that grain in the port. It's done for.
When Andriy got there in the morning and crossed the guarded cordon, he was struck by the scale of the damage. They never bothered cleaning the drains, his Cuban contact Roberto snorted. Figured they weren't ever used here. He no longer asked himself why the people in a country ravaged by famine relate so differently to those dying of starvation and to food. Ethiopia was a Soviet Union writ small.
No taiga? Well, there's a jungle instead. And as for the rest, take your pick. Mountains up to 17,000 feet, deserts, savanna, the sea, the Nile. You couldn't find a more diverse corner of Africa. And almost 100 nations and tribes. An empire. Well, were they not eating apricots in Tashkent while those under siege in Leningrad had to gnaw at frozen corpses?
The water was knee-high everywhere. The 10-foot stacks of bagged wheat had created a dam all along the quay and beyond the port. In places, the water was waist-high. He thought as he counted the bags out of habit.
The lower rows are hopelessly soaked, and there's no one to pour it out of the bags, dry it, and reload it. Plus, the water has nowhere to go. It's going to be absorbed by the grain. After a day in the searing heat, it'll start rotting. And we are talking thousands of tons here.
The first day, the port was paralyzed. Then the clerks returned to their desks and Andriy continued his torturous rounds. Work resumed at the shipping container terminal, and the water was finally channeled away and pumped out. On the third day, having gathered the necessary signatures, Andriy went to see his clerk. Mulugeta, a round-faced young man with a dainty mustache, was wailing away with a stamp, humming a ditty. Two Ethiopians and a white girl in a Molson Canadian t-shirt stood before him, waiting. A Sikh with a graying beard sat in the visitor's chair, staring in the far corner of the room with the expression of someone conserving his prana, even on eyelid movements. Mulugeta gave Andriy a cheerful nod. Finished. You will have to wait.
Do I have a choice? In this heat, I'd rather be near your air conditioner anyway.
The young woman turned around, smiled affably, and held out her hand. Hi, I'm Mariah Kilparchuk, Toronto, Ontario. She leaned toward him and added quietly, they can drive you nuts, can't they?
That's when he saw her red coral necklace. Almost local, but not. You can say that again, he replied, and then in Ukrainian. I'm Andriy Volinsky from Kyiv, Ukraine. For a moment, she was still, looking at him with a slight frown, as though trying to recall a face. Suddenly, she began to cry. It was so unexpected that Andrei was at a loss.
Sorry. Then in Ukrainian, it's my nerves. I've been trying for 3 days to clear my container. These jerks are driving me crazy. I should say, these bureaucrats.
So what's the problem? With the container, I mean.
It's not it, it's the customs, even though all the goods are for the famine victims. Last time we sent our Girma here and it took him 2 weeks to clear it, and we were lucky at that. So I came this time, thought it would be quicker this way. I have no doubt that this honorable Indian gentleman is here for the same reason. The Sikh rose from the chair, took his papers expressionlessly, and put out his hand. The clerk bowed his head respectfully, and then the gentleman left. Raya and Andrei stepped towards the desk. Mulugeta glanced at Andrei meaningfully. And why is he so friendly with you?
I gave him a valuable gift yesterday. Selected works by the leader of the global revolution in Amharic.
You're joking.
Not at all. It turns out he's just about to take his exams in their Communist Party education system. And for him, these books are real godsend, because everything they have is in English.
Mulugeta piped up. Hey, where are you guys really from? What language is that? They hadn't noticed that it was their turn. Tell him it's none of his damned business.
Raya, we'll never get our clearance documents from him that way.
Ah, big shot. She switched back to English. All right, comrade. We're speaking Ukrainian. Never heard of it, have you? Ukraine's a nation of 52 million in Europe, plus 2 million in North America. This fellow's from the old country. Incidentally, they call it the breadbasket of the Soviet Union. Me, I'm from the wrong side of the family. Mulugeta sighed. We also have 2 million countrymen in North America, my own brother among them. They left with her customs warrants, signed and stamped, not believing their good fortune.
You charmed him. I was hoping for tomorrow at best.
Ah, but I am entitled to preferential treatment as a Canadian citizen, aren't I? Did you see the wheat in the port?
I deliver it.
You what?
I deliver it, transport it on trucks all over this country.
You're pulling my leg. You work as a driver.
Andrei laughed. He liked her. As an interpreter, with one of our relief units. What?
Nothing. Get in. This is my car, she said, pointing at a pickup. I thought you were from their embassy. Look, you're not KGB, are you?
Sure, just operating under this sophisticated cover. A KGB officer who hoofs it all across Asab every morning to obtain his hardtack and macaroni.
Well, who knows with you guys?
Seriously, no connection to the KGB. They did try to recruit me, though.
Raya slowed down the car. You know, we cleared a big hurdle today. Let's celebrate. My treat.
Why yours? I owe you as it is.
Not me. Thank Comrade Lenin.
Okay, we'll consider it our joint accomplishment. Your feminine charms and the progressive theory of Marxism-Leninism.
Thank you kindly. At least you put my feminine charms first. Coming from a Soviet muzhik, this must be a compliment. Now, we have to turn here. She almost ran over a goat and braked in front of a bar with a sign that read, air conditioner working.